right there. Hey, data lovers, and welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of the Ohio State University. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays. And today we are going to be doing a replay or review of the IDEC data collection update town hall meeting that was on July 1st, 2021. So this is just a replaying of all the information that was given out during the town hall meeting and includes answers to the questions that were asked during the town hall meeting. But before we get into it, hey, who's talking to you? Well, of course, you've got me, Jeff Breimer-Bashore, Director and Co-Principal Investigator here at the International Data Evaluation Center. Just a quick reminder, data submission deadline for this school year, the 2020-21 school year, is August 6th, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So get your data in by then. Also, just a reminder, reading recovery teachers are fantastic. Teacher leaders, if you had a chance to come to the Deviant Data session at the Teacher Leader Institute, this is the chart that I showed there. We are looking sort of at our classic chart of the text reading level for our first round and second round accelerated progress students. And we're looking at data from the 2018-19 school year. So the purple line is for our first round accelerated progress, and the pink line is for our second round accelerated progress, and that dashed line is for a random sample. And you can see this is the typical chart that we usually see our kids when they get into reading recovery make that accelerated progress, catching up to the random sample, and finish right with the random sample right about the end of the school year. So now I'm going to put up this year's data so far, the 2021 school year. And folks, look at that. So I'm going to go back and forth. Here's 2018-19, 2021, 2018-19, 2021. So here are the differences. All students, including the random sample, started a little lower this year. So if I go back to that chart, you can see that the beginnings of the line started a little lower this year. And then typically, we don't see our first round students going past our random sample. We usually see them catching up to the random sample. So here's 2018 data. Look at how that purple line usually intersects with the random sample line. This year, our kids went right past the random sample on the first round students. And then the other big difference is at the end of the school year. Right here, we are still, our reading recovery kids, including our second round kids, finished above the typical first grader or a random sample. So let me go back to last year so you can see what or 2018-19. So you can see how the random sample are typically right there with our students. But our students finished higher than the random sample this year. So in short, if I had to put it in 2 bullet points, despite starting lower this year, our kids who made accelerated progress finished at the same exact spot that they do every single year in reading recovery. But this year they finished ahead of where we would typically see on the random sample in text reading level. Job well done, teachers. You are fantastic. All right, so let's move on. Get past that screen there. All right, so before we get into that, I also want to give many thanks to my wonderful team at IDEC. Now, teacher leaders, you know that this year we revamped the design of our reports. What you don't know is, along with revamping the design, we also revamped our whole reporting system that generates these reports. So it's one thing to produce one report for one person. It's another to reproduce like 7 types of reports for 5,000 different people in schools. And so we have a automated high volume reporting system that does all that work. And this year, not only did we update the designs, but we updated our reporting system as well. And I couldn't have done that without the excellent help from Dwayne Chandler, one of our software engineers at IDEC. He did a great job of what we call like programming all the invisible stuff that you see behind the systems, churning out those reports and everything. Also, many thanks to Sarika Kasukurthi, our other software engineer at IDEC. She worked very hard on creating our internal user interfaces that IDEC employees use to manage and run reports. And then finally, many thanks to our talented Julie Wolf at our help desk. Um, I often say that at IDEC I have the unofficial title of Chief Crap Deflector, meaning that I try to block out all of this distractions from the staff so they can concentrate on doing their jobs. I feel like during the last 5 months, Julie was my assistant chief crap deflector, as she was blocking those things from us to help us keep those reports, our work on the reports going forward and with as little distraction as possible. And let me just tell you, she was handling a million things at a time. So thank you, my wonderful IDEC staff, for making all these changes this year so we can get everybody some data. One thing that I learned from the Teacher Leader Institute, from your feedback from the Teacher Leader Institute, is that you want more time with data. So message received. So one of the things that IDEC will try to work on this year is to give you more opportunities to get down into the data and work with your data, just like we did at the Teacher Leader Institute. All right, let's get into today's agenda. So first, I'm going to start with some general updates. At the town hall meeting yesterday, I stopped for questions. At this point in the video, I will just sort of relay the information that came up during the question and answer session of the general updates. Then we're going to talk about the Hearing and Recording Sounds and Words pilot study. And then I will break and talk about actually what I've done. I've incorporated any questions that came up. I've updated my slides to address the questions that were asked during the town hall meeting. And then finally, I'm just going to give you a little preliminary view of the data from this school year, the 2021 school year. We're not going to go in depth. That would take forever. We're just going to take a quick glance at some of the data and see what we see. And I'll just relay some information or questions that came up as well. All right, so let's get started here. Let's talk about our general updates. So this year, IDEC has published new stay nines for you to use this year, and we're asking teachers and teacher leaders to start using those stay nines. So to get to the new stay nines, all you have to do is come over to the IDEC public website. That's www.idecweb.us. You will click on publications. This will take you to our publications page, and then you will come down to our methodology section, and you will see where are you? U.S. norms for tasks of an observation of early literacy achievement, and also a U.S. norms for our Instrumento de Observación for our DLL program. And if you just click on that, that will download the new document, and it should say, when you open that document up, it should say May 2021 up there in the left-hand corner, and that's how you know the new stay nines. Now, I've had people ask me, how is this going to affect kids discontinuing, and how's that going to change that? And the honest answer is, I have no idea. It's going to change it in some way. And once you guys start using the new stay nines, we'll see how that all plays out. In general, what you will see in the stay nines, the updated stay nines, is that children have become more proficient over time. And so the average band has gotten just slightly higher now at each time point in fall, mid-year, and year-end. So, all right, let me take that off the screen. Let's get back to my slides. All right, let me switch that tier too. All right, so after that, just a reminder that all schools will be collecting random sample data this year, so no tested, not instructed data collection year. All schools will be collecting random sample data this year, 2 students per school. You will find that we'll be removing the pandemic-related questions from the website. We will still be using the current hearing and recording sounds and words forms for all of our students. So all students will be tested with the current forms, except for schools that will be participating in the hearing and recording sounds and words pilot study. I will have more information on that in 2 slides, so just hold on. I will get that. But for all schools not in the hearing and recording sounds and words pilot study, everybody will be using the current hearing and recording sounds and words forms. And I am going to move on to our hearing and recording sounds and words pilot study, information about that. And here is just a quick overview of the study. So IDEC will be selecting 300 schools to participate in the study. The last time we tried to do the study, we had everybody participating, but this year we will only be selecting 300 schools. There will be 2 students per school. So remember, we're just doing this on random sample students, so we only select 2 random sample students per school. So it's 2 students per school that will be participating in the 300 schools that are selected for the study. And as I just said there, this will be for only random sample students. So if your school is selected, what the changes that I will be talking about only affect the random sample students, not your reading recovery students. If your school is selected, schools will stop using the current hearing and recording sounds and words forms, and you will begin to use the new pilot forms, because that's what we're testing out, these new sentences for hearing and recording sounds and words. You will continue to administer the other tasks of the observation survey, so please continue to administer the 5 other tasks along with the pilot hearing and recording sounds and words forms. Now, one difference from the last time that we tried to do this is that teachers will administer 2 forms at fall, mid-year, and year-end. So we will be trialing 5 different forms. At fall, teachers will administer 2 forms. At mid-year, they will administer 2 forms of the pilot sentences, and they will administer 2 forms at year-end as well. So at each of those time points, we will be administering 2 forms. All right, so how are we selecting schools? So the student selection process for the hearing, recording sounds, and words. So remember, as we said, this study only uses random sample students, or it's 4 random sample students only, and there will be 2 random sample students per school. So we will just, you will go through the normal random sample student selection procedures at the start of the school year. If your school is a part of the hearing and recording sounds and words study, then those students become 2 students automatically become a part of this study. What's going to be a little different this year is that we will need you to enter the names of your random sample students by September the 10th. So the reason why we're having you do this is because IDEC doesn't actually know which schools are participating in reading recovery until you guys start actually entering data. So we are just asking you to enter the names of students. You know, the first step on that student data page is to enter a name and pick a school, select the student group, and click Save. And that's it. We're not asking you to enter any fall data. We're not asking you to enter any background data. Just get the student names into the system. Now, if I was doing this live, about 600 hands would have raised up in the area there, and people would ask me, but Jeff, we can't enter students until we've paid. We will be changing the website so you can enter random sample students without payment, okay? So you'll be able to get those names in by September the 10th. It is at that point, once that we have the names, that IDEC will go through and randomly select 300 schools, all right? So, and then we will notify you shortly after September the 10th if you have a school that has been selected for the study. So we will email teacher leaders letting you know that if you have a school or not. Now, in general, we're picking 300 schools. There's roughly 250-ish sites across the country. That means most everyone will probably have 1 school that is going to be participating in the study, with some sites possibly having more than 1 school. But remember, we're not doing all schools this year. We're just doing 300. So just be prepared to have 1 or 2, and in a rare occasion, maybe possibly 3 schools in the study. It's going to be a random process, so I don't have control over it. I don't know how many exactly per site, but it'll be around that. Okay, so at this point, a question came up in our, after we got through that slide, about some timeline and some procedural clarifications. And this specifically was talking about schools who are starting in late July to early to mid-August. And like I said, this was based on some town hall questions. And so here is the problem that was brought up. So they were saying these early starting schools can't wait till September the 10th to fall test their random sample students, because we ask you to test your students within a 3-week window of the start of the school year. And if you wait for these early testing schools, waiting till September 10th puts you clearly outside of that 3-week testing window for fall. So what we're asking you to do for schools that are starting before August the 23rd and is to go ahead and just test your random sample students using the OS and the current hearing, recording sounds and words, and just hold on to the scores. All right, so go ahead, test them within the first 3 weeks of the school year, and hold on to the scores. If you are selected for the study, just retest those 2 students on the pilot hearing and recording sounds and words form, and then enter all of that OS data on the IDEC website. And follow the study protocol from this point forward. If a school is not selected, then go ahead and enter the OS scores with the old hearing and recording sounds and words and follow the usual random sample protocols. All right, so how will teachers know which forms to use? So remember, we're administering forms at fall, mid-year, and year-end, 2 different forms. On the student data page, you will click to find out. Teachers and teacher leaders can go to the student data page and click on the View School List button. And as I said, this button is visible to both teachers and teacher leaders. So here is just a sample of the school data page. We'll just click on that button right there, and what that will bring up is your list of schools. All right, and in the fall, you will on September the 10th, for schools that are participating in the study, this fall column will appear. And if a school has been selected, you'll see there at Freedom Elementary School has been selected. And we know it's been selected because they will be using Form D and E in the fall to assess their 2 students in the random sample. So each student is tested with Form D and Form E. Then around the middle of the school year, we'll enable this mid-year column, and your teachers will know then to use Forms C and B, or at least in this example, they will be using Forms C and B to test each of their students on. And then finally, near the end of the school year, we will have you bring up the year-end column, and in this example, we will see that the teachers will use Forms E and A to test their students. So you and your teachers will be able to see that. So, all right, so I'm excited. Let's talk a little data. We'll get into the data part of this I Love Data Fridays. So I wanted to kind of take a look, just a very broad overview of our different groups, of our different intervention statuses. What do those kids kind of look like this year, numerically, sort of speaking? So I just wanted to start with a breakdown of intervention status for our first-round students. So here we see a 5-year presentation of data, 1 set of bars for each school year, starting with 2016-17, going to 2021 this year. The blue section is accelerated progress student. The orange sections are progress students, and the red sections are recommended students. You can see in the fall that we typically, in the past, have hovered somewhere, not always quite a 50-50 split between our recommended and accelerated progress, but somewhere around there for our first round. And this year, with our progress students, we can see that we have about a 38, 28, 34% split among our students right there. In the second round, it looks like this. We've added another color, the sort of teal color. This is our incomplete students. You can see that usually in the past, we've had about 61-ish, 62-ish% of kids who are accelerated progress, and around between 34 to 37 percent of kids who are incomplete, and then with about 1 or 2% of kids who are recommended. We're going to ignore the 1920 bar because we had a lot of kids that were just none of above, and it distorts the data. So let's just compare it to, we'll just take a look at 2021. And we can see that this year we have still a larger proportion of incomplete children, about 51%. We had about 7% of our kids so far that were coded as progressed in the second round, 38% that were accelerated progress, and 4% that were recommended. So still a little higher percentage than what we saw typically in the past with our incomplete kids. Let's move on and look at accelerated progress kids in general. I am just going to show you a brief summary of data. We're going to break down data by first round and second round accelerated progress kids. And each of those rounds, we're going to look at entry text level, entry writing vocabulary, their growth on the total score from entry to exit to sort of see what the effect of reading recovery was. We'll look at the number of lessons they got and the average number of weeks their lessons lasted. And once again, I have 5 years of data. Now, I'm not going to go over every piece of data. I'm just going to go through the highlights. So, in general, one thing that you will notice on the growth from entry to exit in the first round, you can see that usually we make somewhere like about 140 points of growth from the start to the end of first round. This year, your teachers got about 153 points of growth out of our accelerated progress students. And we can see at least on one of the tasks, though, I know on all the tasks, though, as kids were starting a little lower. And you can see that reflected here in the writing vocabularies. It dropped down a little bit for them. What's else? Accelerated progress kids really didn't get that much more lessons. It's been averaging around 68, 69. This year they got 70. And they got about they were in reading recovery for about a half a week longer, 19 weeks compared to about 18 and a half weeks. In the second round, we see a similar trend where kids were making about 75 to 77 points of growth during reading recovery. This year, teachers were getting about 80 points of growth. They got slightly less lessons in the second round, and their lessons were slightly shorter. Instead of being about 14 weeks, they were just about 13 weeks, so 1 week less of lessons. And they did start the second round this year lower than what we would typically see at a text level 6 and with a writing vocabulary of about 30. For our recommended students, same layout to the chart, everybody, so I'll skip the description of the layout. Once again, we see that, let's see, this year, our recommended kids came in lower. So instead of having an average around 1, kids came in at an average of about a 0, with about a 4 on the writing vocabulary. And this year, recommended kids in reading recovery made less growth, but this is not a bad thing. This is I believe, the effect of our progressed category. So now, before where recommended kids were in previous years contained both recommended and progressed kids, now are truly really hard to instruct children are really represented by that recommended category. So nothing to be dismayed about here. They got slightly less number of lessons this year, but still got about the same number. We're still in reading recovery about the same amount of time. In the second round, we see that they came in a little lower than what we would typically see in the second round, any recommended kids who were in the second round, and got, instead of a chance to get a full, well, here's interesting. So instead of getting a chance to get a full 20 weeks, the average for our recommended kids this year was about 16 and a half weeks at about 55 lessons instead of 71. All right, so here's some quick look at some progressed data. Now, I have the same layout with the exception that we only have 1 year of data here. So our progressed children, so I wanted to show this because people have been asking IDEC throughout the school year, like, how do we know if somebody is progressed, or what do our progressed children look like? And the answer is we don't know until about this time of the year, once you guys get data in, and we can finally tell you what you've told us progressed children have looked like, so to speak, numerically. So this, numerically, is sort of what progressed, not sort of, but this is what our progressed children looked like this year. They came in at about a text level 1, writing vocabulary 7, made about 142 points of growth, 143 if you round that up. They got about 73 lessons and were reading recovery for about 20 weeks in that first round. So I think this played out like what we thought we were expecting it to play out, that our accelerated progress kids make the most growth. If we go back, you can see, yes, they make that 153 points of growth this year. Accelerated progress kids, or progressed kids, make that next amount of growth. And they made about 143 points of growth. And then our recommended kids made about 110, 111 points of growth during reading recovery. So I think things played out like we thought they were going to sort of play out. Now, we can see that we have some kids that were labeled as progressed in the second round. We can see that they made about 73 points of growth on the total score, had about 51 lessons, and got about 14 weeks of instruction. Here is our incomplete children, some incomplete data. What's different this year? I'm just going to point out the differences. Incomplete children got less lessons this year than we would typically see in the past, and in fact, they seem to have got less lessons than our progressed children. So progressed children got about 51 lessons. Incomplete kids got about 45 if you round up lessons, and they got about 12 weeks of instruction instead of the usual what we would saw 14 weeks of instruction, and our progressed children tended to get about 14 weeks of instruction in that second round. So it kind of asked me, what's the difference between incomplete and progressed children? So here are their data side by side. That is what I was comparing. They seem to have started at a somewhat similar place, though the progressed children started slightly higher. Progressed children made more growth. During the spring, they got more lessons and had more time in reading recovery. So data-wise, the difference between our incomplete and progressed children in the second round seemed to be the amount of time that they had. And so I just did a quick sort of time chart. We're looking at the date of first lesson, so the number of students who have started reading recovery by their date of first lesson. So the orange line is for our progressed children. The green line is for our the orange line is for progressed. The teal line is for our incomplete children. So you can see by about March the 6th, 50% of our progressed kids had started their lessons by March the 6th, whereas only it took to about March 16th or so for 50% of our incomplete kids to start their lessons. So there seemed to be a lag. But there's certainly incomplete kids who started back around when our progressed kids started. All right, data lovers, well, thank you for joining me for another episode of I Love Data Fridays and our IDEC annual update. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to contact IDEC with those questions. And with that, I will say, hey, we will talk data to you later.